Hello, everyone. I want to do something a little different today with everyone. Some of you may remember those old-time radio programs that took you on an adventure by telling you a story. I'd like to begin with a story of an impossible-to-get-out-of situation because I know that many of you have enormous challenges in your life, or at some point in the future you will, and I want you to remember this story as a source of inspiration and hope when you're feeling like you'll never get out of what you're facing. After I tell you this story, I'd like to demonstrate that there is a specific method you can use for getting out of very difficult situations, and this method has served me extraordinarily well in my lifetime. It doesn't matter if you've been dealt the hand of a crippling injury that takes away your ability to walk around freely like I experienced, or if your living situation has become a nightmare, or if you're in some kind of financial hell or your job is sucking the lifeblood out of you. There is a way forwards even though you may not be able to see it from where you are right now. As I explain this method, I'll be demonstrating it, because I just used it once again to create a rather unbelievable outcome to what seemed to me to be an impossible situation to get out of, and in the process, converted a highly discouraging, disappointing, and upsetting circumstance for over 300 people into an experience and expression of love and joy and goodwill. The really cool part is that the outcome is going to positively inspire over 30,000 people initially, and it's just going to grow from there. So let's begin with a story that took place 100 years ago. It's a story about an impossible situation and how to retain hope and your composure when you're faced with the impossible. If you're not driving or doing anything dangerous like operating heavy machinery, you can close your eyes and fully experience this story, imagining yourself in this story. You are on a wooden sailing ship bound on an expedition to the South Pole. As you sail south, the ice gets thicker and thicker until it becomes so thick that your ship becomes trapped in the pack ice. As the ice shifts, your ship starts making groaning and cracking sounds. The ice is crushing your ship. You have no radio communication, and no one knows you and your crew are in serious trouble. You have limited supplies. As the months go by, so do your options. Your sled dogs are consuming valuable food, so one by one, you decide that in order to survive, you must kill and eat them. After 9 months, it becomes clear that your ship will be completely crushed by the ice. You have no choice but to abandon it and walk out onto the ice floe with all the provisions you can carry. Lowering your 3 lifeboats to the ice and all needed supplies, you and your crew exit the doomed ship. 3 weeks later, your ship is completely crushed. It disintegrates and sinks before your eyes. You and your crew are now completely alone. Miles of sea ice have formed, and it will require a Herculean effort to get the lifeboats to open water. Even so, the nearest civilization is over 800 miles away on South Georgia Island. Rowing open lifeboats over bitterly cold, rough seas is a slim chance at best. If you are lucky, you might be able to find enough penguins here or other creatures to kill for food. The situation is grim. Your chances of rescue before freezing are almost nil. Your chances of saving yourselves are almost nil. If you think you are doomed, you are probably right. What do you think is possible to you in your future? Can you see anything other than freezing to death? This is such a difficult situation that it's hard to imagine anything else. However, not only did this situation actually occur, someone lived to tell the story. Of the 28-man expedition, how many do you think survived? I invite you now to take a mental guess. When the explorer, Sir Ernest Shackleton, and his crew were faced with this situation in 1915, there was no clear-cut answer as to what to do. Should they wait for help, conserving food, fuel, and energy as much as possible? Should they just resign themselves to their icy fate of freezing to death? Or should they try to do everything in their power to get the lifeboats to open water and attempt to get to civilization, even though they'd probably die trying? One thing was for sure. No one was coming to look for them, at least not in the near future. Since the future seemed so bleak, even the best decision might not make any difference in the outcome. In all likelihood, they would freeze to death, no matter what they chose. Now, some men wanted to stay put. It made sense to them to conserve their strength and resources. But others just couldn't see any way out and had resigned themselves to freezing to death. They had no idea how long it would be before they'd be discovered or rescued. And if they were, would anyone still be alive? Against the enormous reluctance of some, Shackleton convinced his crew to set out across the rough ice to try to get to civilization. They pushed, pulled, carried, and dragged their lifeboats and supplies across the jagged ice, averaging less than 2 miles per day. Days, weeks, and months passed. By the time they finally got to open water, the ice floe had shifted north to within sight of Elephant Island. Although it was land, no one lived on that island. After 7 days on very rough seas, they did get to dry land. By this point, they had already survived one Antarctic winter, and a second one was only 2 months away. The whaling village of South Georgia Island still lay another 800 miles away on rough, wintry seas. In an open boat, they'd sink or freeze before reaching the island. If they were going to make it, they had to convert one of the 3 lifeboats into a sailboat from the materials they had with them. But it meant that only a few of them could make the trip. The others would have to wait for rescue and pray that the few who were on the sailboat could actually make it, get to civilization, and send a rescue ship. So the one lifeboat was eventually converted into a sailboat and loaded with supplies. 6 of the 28 men, including Shackleton, set sail. After 17 days in bitterly cold water, they finally arrived at South Georgia Island, 800 miles away. Unfortunately, they landed on the wrong side of the island, and they could sail no further. The island's interior was completely uncharted and unknown. After the 6 made camp, Shackleton and 2 others set out to cross the glacier-covered mountainous interior. They had little food, improper clothing, no shelter, and had no idea what lay before them. Their nonstop march finally got them to the whaling village on the other side of the island 36 hours later. Knocking on a familiar door and seeing a familiar face, Shackleton was surprised by the man's first response. The very same man who had helped Shackleton prepare for his expedition greeted him now as if he were a stranger. Shackleton was so rough and worn by the journey that the whaler didn't even recognize him. Once Shackleton spoke his name, the whaler was incredulous. Shackleton's story was nearly impossible to believe. Although the 3 crew on the other side of the island were picked up a day later, it would take 3 attempts and 3 months before the remaining crew could be picked up from Elephant Island, 800 miles away. After exposure to over 497 days of the coldest weather on Earth, this is surely one of the most amazing stories anyone has ever lived to tell. Of those who did survive, the worst injuries were the loss of a few toes due to frostbite. How many do you think survived? Incredibly, every single one. There are times when a situation will seem hopeless. We cannot imagine how we can possibly make it through. Certainly Shackleton and his party had visions of dying icy deaths. However, there was something that was very different about Shackleton. Something that was not visible to the eyes. It was something on the inside. That thing is the basis for hope, even in the most dire circumstances. I've referred to this thing on the inside as hero vision. Now, hero vision is not a high and mighty perception of oneself. Rather, it's the knowledge that there are 2 realities in which we live. Like everyone else, heroes see the objective reality visible to the senses, but they also see another reality that is superimposed on top of it. And it is this second reality that makes heroes different. It permits them to automatically find hope no matter what the situation. Can you guess what this second reality is? Heroes see what is using their senses. Then they see what could be using their imagination. We are all heroes to the degree that we can imagine. The origin of hope is the ability to see using your imagination, not what is, but what could be, based upon what's available. Your senses will show what's available. It's your imagination that shows what you might be able to make out of the circumstances. The most potent vision sees both what is and what could be. Shackleton's crew saw the situation they were in and the resources they had available. Some of them simply came to the obvious conclusion that they were doomed because the only vision they were using is their eyes. Shackleton did not think they were doomed. Instead, he inserted an extra step between seeing with his eyes and arriving at a conclusion. He put his imagination to work. That was the beginning step of hero vision. Based on what he saw with his eyes, he considered what he might do with the available resources. Was there a way out of this mess? What was their best chance of survival? What was the chance they'd be rescued by staying put and conserving resources? What was their chance of surviving if they tried to make it to South George Island so very far away? How could they improve their odds? Which expert knowledge from his crew could he use to help them all get out of this alive? He turned the problem over and over in his mind. As he did so, he got ideas and saw possibilities. There was actually more than one conceivable outcome, and more than one way of reaching it. He could use the visible resources to move them all to an imaginative conclusion of living. He became optimistic. And so hope is born in the very moment you decide to search for outcomes beyond the obvious. Don't listen to your eyes and ears and all the other people around you who are only too glad to tell you that you are doomed. When Shackleton finally thought he had an answer, he still had to make a convincing argument to his crew so that they would follow him. He kept working at it, and as he did so, it became easier. What he saw with his imagination was far more encouraging than what he saw with his eyes. His eyes gave him resources he could use. His imagination gave him a vision and helped him produce a plan. Whatever you can see with your imagination can be 1,000,000 times more potent than what you can see using your eyes alone, and the greatest hope comes from combining both. To Shackleton, hero vision engaged, there was much more possible than the obvious outcome of freezing to death. By focusing on saving the expedition instead of focusing on the imagined horrible possible future and the very likely outcome that they would all freeze to death, he converted every resource into a powerful survival tool, and possibility became reality 20 months later. Now, in the final analysis, Shackleton could have been wrong. However, it is unlikely that anyone would have survived if they didn't try to rescue themselves. More likely, they would have developed pessimistic attitudes, and the expedition would have fragmented into various factions. When bad attitudes prevail, it is only a matter of time before they decay into infighting, despondency, and hopelessness. Under these conditions, people cease trying to better their circumstances, and time converts the obvious conclusion into the only possible conclusion. So that's the story segment of our program, and I hope it has inspired you to a higher place, because now we're going to shift gears and learn how to apply a methodology for converting the lemons in your life into lemonade. The first thing I want to promise each of you listening is that no matter what your circumstances, no matter what you face in your life today or your life to come, whatever you're seeing with your eyes, whatever you're feeling in your heart, whatever your soul is aching about, there is a way to take the pain you have and convert it into something that will take you from where you are into something glorious. The things that are hurting you right now are the doorways in your life to the greater life that lies beyond. And the transformation you go through as a result will build within you new confidence, new abilities, and a sense that not only are you much more capable than you thought, but that you're here for a higher reason and a higher purpose. All the great masters have told us that If you will apply love to your circumstances, you will elevate yourself to do works of mastery. But from where you may be standing right now or lying down as I was after a spine injury, you may be in a place of disbelief. You're just not capable of getting out of the situation or turning bad into good or the pain into an expression of love. The whole concept may seem to you to be way over the top. So today, I'm going to ask you to stretch a little, and I'm going to show you specifically how you can use the same method that has worked for me over and over again in my life to lift myself out of situations I didn't see coming and certainly didn't want. To begin with, I'm going to ask you to let go of the part of yourself that says it cannot be done. And imagine for a moment that it can. Remember, there are two distinct visions in front of you. One is what your senses are telling you. The other is the vision imparted by your imagination. And I'm going to show you that when your imagination seems to be failing and is insufficient to the task, there is a powerful alternative that can produce the most amazing outcomes that you'd never expect or have any reason to believe is even possible. So let's talk about letting go of the idea that there's no way out and the choice to let go of that idea. If you consider all the previous things you have clung to in your life, the things that you love, the things you want more of, the things you worked so hard to achieve, I think you'll agree that all those things are worth keeping and holding on to for dear life. And just as quickly, I think you'll agree that all the terrible, bad, and ugly things you should reject and run away from as quickly as you can. So tell me this. If you hang on to the good and get rid of the bad, why on earth would you consciously choose to cling to negative thoughts that speak to you of impossibility? You don't want that thought. Why would you keep reliving the thoughts that tell you things cannot be done, that your situation is impossible to get out of? Why would you keep reimagining and re-envisioning horrible possible futures that haven't even arrived yet, when you could be imagining ways to get out of your situation? I don't want you to get the wrong impression about what I'm saying. I am not here to present yet another dissertation on positive thinking. All I'm saying is that there is a dividing line in your life, and you're sitting on that line. You want the good things, but at the same time are clinging to the very thoughts that tell you that the things you want are for all intents and purposes impossible in your particular situation. And I'll bet you can list the reasons why you cannot get out of it. And what's more, all the reasons sound very good and very convincing. Let me tell you how our minds work by default. If the decision-making portion of our minds is convinced by those reasons, then we can justify our victimhood. We can justify why we must endure the daily pain we're in. We can justify abusive relationships. We can justify why we shouldn't be happy, and so on. When our minds are set because they have been convinced by good-sounding reasons, without the interjection of imagination, we definitely are stuck. We're trapped because we're holding on to ideas that stop us from imagining what is possible to us in our current circumstances. It is only when we perform an act of will to ask our imagination to chime in that we can get out of our pain. Now, here's something new, and it's the first point you can apply to your life. What if the future you wanted, or the change you are seeking, or the outcome you want is possible because of a possibility you didn't realize was there? In other words, what if there was an invisible blind corner from around which a marvelous solution could happen in your life? No, I'm not talking about God or religion here. What I am saying is that we've all been surprised many times in our lives by good things that caught us completely off guard. We had no idea that they were there, that they would find us, that they were even possible, yet somehow the universe imagined something greater for us than we could imagine for ourselves in that situation. And voila, there was this thing we never imagined, and it happened. So the first point is, the universe can imagine more for us in our circumstances than we can. There are many more things possible than we can imagine with our tiny minds. Wouldn't it be great if we could find a way to tap into the greater imagination of the universe. In fact, that's what we're going to be talking about, and I'll demonstrate a living, breathing example of this that's going on right now. First, let me say out loud the reason we don't see greater possibilities. The reason is that when we're faced with serious challenges, we get so caught up in what's in front of us that it fully occupies our mental, physical, and emotional space. And because of this, there's no room for any other possibility in our minds. We recognize the reasons that things are the way they are. We develop justifications, and the sheer fright, fear, and stress of what we are seeing can overwhelm us. So let's see what we need to do to tap into the greater imagination of the universe. First, we need to acknowledge that the universe has already imagined greater possibilities than we're seeing, feeling, or living in. It's very important to acknowledge that we do not know everything about our current situation, because that leaves room for something new to come in. If we think we know everything, the door is closed. The moment we admit we must not know exactly everything, we've made room for a solution to come in. That's step one of converting lemons into lemonade, the simple acknowledgement that a greater possibility exists. Having done this, we can also acknowledge that over and over again in our lives, the universe has proven that it has greater mental capacity and a greater physical delivery mechanism than we ourselves possess. Here's one of the coolest questions I've ever uncovered, and it's especially useful when you are faced with a major challenge in your life. It's just 3 words. What is possible? What is possible? I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge something. Isn't it true that all of us have imagined greater lives for ourselves than the ones we find ourselves living in today? We didn't set out to be where we are. We set out as small children to live a great life in a more beautiful world than the one we saw around us. We wanted to live in a world that was filled with the great problems solved and living more happily than ever. What happened to us? As kids, we saw what was right and good and fun and joyful, and we decided to have that life when we were grown-ups. I hear some of you laughing and even thinking, yeah, then we grew up and realized how the world really was and what we had to do to survive in it. We were just naive kids back then. Of course we lost our childhood visions of how life would be. And of course you're right. My question to you right now is, are you sure? What is possible? The moment we ask this question, we've gone from the place of impossibility to possibility, because we are asking the universe to fill our minds with any and every conceivable way of getting ourselves out of our situation and into a better one. The key to rising above the challenges you face is to dare to ask, why not? Why can't things be different than what every sight, every sound, every feeling, every body, and everything is telling you? Why can't they be different? What is really possible in my situation? What was really possible at the bottom of the planet in Ernest Shackleton's situation? As soon as you ask this question, you open the door to the possibilities the universe has imagined, which are far greater than the possibilities your own tiny mind has imagined. So why not? Do I need to cling so fiercely to what all my senses are telling me, or can I choose to imagine, just as I did as a child, that greater possibilities are available? From here on forth, that's what I'm going to ask you to do whenever you're faced with a seemingly impossible circumstance. You give up your need to hold on to fear of frightening outcomes and say, please, oh great universe, surprise me. I'm ready for it. I know you can imagine something greater than I can. Let me now put on my child's thinking cap about the greater life I am going to live when I grow up. And then, imagine. Imagine the life you're going to live in the sunshine with the birds and bees and flowers and joy, everything so beautiful. This is the mindset. This is the mindset of the child, the wisdom of the child that knows the true path for accessing possibilities that are greater than what you think you've got and what you are seeing right now. Many of you may remember a biblical passage that says, "And a small child shall lead them." Let the mind of your child within lead you to imagine what the universe can imagine. No limits, nothing impossible. It's just you and the universe imagining together, hand in hand as you used to, about the world in which you are going to live. Let me tell you a little story that illustrates exactly what I mean. This is the living, breathing example that I promised you, and is taking place right now. Back in 2010, I think it was, a few years after starting our nonprofit to help war refugees and sponsor peace education, we were approached by a friend who'd helped us many times over the years in support of our vision of peace. He said he had something he thought we'd be interested in that could help our nonprofit while at the same time inspire many other people to create goodness in the world. What he came to us with was a program to help people who had always aspired to writing a book. It was a training program to teach people how to write that book, to publish it, and to then promote it so that they could become genuine authors. More importantly, the authors would write inspirational books that would help raise other people upwards. How cool was that? People helping people upwards multiplied through the power of numerous copies of inspirational books. Let me tell you, we were in. It was an easy project to say yes to. What followed were several groups of new authors, each writing inspirational books to the tune of about 350 authors, each expressing their own childlike vision in more practical adult form. These were people who took their own life experiences and their visions of hope and light and love and converted them into inspirational books to help lift the world to a higher place. About 100 of those authors published their books in physical form, with many others publishing e-books. The cool part was that the books produced weren't just books. They were books with an associated website where the authors could upload related videos, audios, additional written materials, worksheets, quizzes, planning tools, and so on to fully expand the experience of the book. All this online material provided by the authors went straight into our friend's book support website. This book writing program provided much more than any other authoring program on the market, and at less than 1/10 of the cost. In terms of creating goodness in the world and expressing practical methods for creating peace and love, this was a wonderful expression. Now, what wasn't wonderful is that what was promised as part of the book promotion process is that authors would get their books listed in a book catalog that was to go to 1,000 independent bookstores and gift shops. The catalog was late, and no one was working on putting it together. Our friend became too busy to deliver this piece of the project, even though he was the one to initiate and promise this to the authors. And while our friend talked about refunding the catalog listing payments, reneging on delivering this part of the course would have been a huge disappointment to authors and would have generated a lot of bad will. There was no way I was going to let this happen. I was going to deliver the promised catalog. I knew what to do. I'd take on the job of collecting the book descriptions and ordering information for the catalog and compiling it into something as close as I could to what the printed catalog hopefully would look like, so that when our friend did reemerge, he could help us deliver on the promise. The authors were happy to see progress finally, but the process dragged on. In fact, it dragged on for over 2 years and then 3, and then our friend went out of business. He wasn't going to help deliver the catalog. As the figurehead for the catalog in front of all the authors, it was now all on my shoulders. The thing is that we didn't know our friend was going out of business until quite late in the process. As soon as I found out his intentions, I emailed asking what's going to happen to the book support website, because every single book had printed in it numerous references about the online material that's available. The website was an integral part of making those books work. It was absolutely critical. Unfortunately, our friend refused to respond. The next thing I know, an author contacted me to say the website was down. When I looked into it further, it wasn't just that the website was down. The domain name was snatched up by one of those companies that hopes a person will forget to pay their domain renewal fee and then in a panic come begging to them to get it back to the tune of thousands of dollars. We didn't have that kind of money to spend. It's hard to convey the gut-wrenching feeling I had at that moment. The whole thing had blown up in my face. It was no longer a question of refunding the catalog listing fee. The website to stimulate readers' thinking and to help them apply the inspirational material to their lives was suddenly yanked out from under all the books. All the physical books, all the e-books were now crippled. That's not to say that the inspirational content of the books was absent, only that the books could no longer be sold, and we're talking now about over $100,000 the authors had spent printing their physical books, along with a great deal of the author's time, effort, and energy. In the best of cases, this would have resulted in a lot of bad will and angry emails. In the worst case, people would be coming after us. Okay, there's the lemon. How on earth was I going to turn this one into lemonade? Even though there was a lot of personal goodwill towards me because the authors had come to know me, wiggling out of delivering the book catalog was now a minor consideration. Now their physical books could not even be sold, and all the e-books had to be revised. There had to be something, some solution here to make everyone happy. I knew it was out there. I was sure it was out there. The universe knew it too, but from around what invisible corner could the universe possibly come up with a solution to transform disappointed and angry authors into deeply moved authors, grateful for the outcome the universe would imagine? I had no idea. Most of us in this kind of situation or at this kind of point will throw up our hands and get ready for the sting of whatever pain is about to come our way. From flaming emails to lawsuits, you name it, it's going to hurt, and that's the space we occupy. Positive thinking is not going to work. Whatever was coming was going to sting. Or was it? Could the universe, in its infinite wisdom, really deliver a creation that would feel like love rather than hurt? The answer would become yes, but I certainly didn't know it at the moment I realized the seriousness of the situation, and I didn't feel anything other than doom. So let's talk about the next very important steps in converting lemons into lemonade, no matter what the situation. The first step, as I've already said, is that the universe has greater imagination than we do. So if we adopt that perspective, it's a matter of finding out what the universe has seen that we cannot. So we ask, what is possible? What is possible? There's no guarantee that simply asking that question is going to yield any kind of an answer, but at least we leave the door of possibility open by acknowledging that we don't know everything about the situation. Now, there's an implied assumption here, and the best way I can say it wasn't said by me. In World War II, England was taking a terrible beating, and morale was terrible both on the home front and the war front. Winston Churchill led England to survive the ravages of World War II. I want you to memorize his words because there will never be any way out of your situation unless, as Sir Winston said, never, never, never give up. Never, never, never give up. If you first acknowledge that the universe can imagine something greater, then a little time will go by, and you're like, okay, where is it? Where's this solution? I don't see any great solution. I want my solution. I want it. Where is it? No amount of kicking and screaming will deliver it. The universe works in silence until it's ready to deliver, and when you are ready to listen more closely. What's required of you is patience and trust. The universe is not, as some would say, a giant vending machine. There are those who tout the law of attraction as if it were the only tool in the universe, and they do not do justice to this law. You cannot envision, will, hope, pray, and then demand a solution. It just doesn't work that way. What does work is to know that a certain amount of time will be required to deliver the solution. No one knows how long it will be except the universe. After all, for the magnificent solution you are seeking, everything in the universe has to shift over just a little bit, as my friend Jana Schellman says. Everything has to shift over a little bit. Patience means the willingness to allow things the time needed to shift over. What it also means is that you must simply trust that things are going to work out, even though you cannot see the invisible blind corner from around which the solution is going to arrive. Trust is one of those very difficult spiritual lessons. It's not a matter of belief, as if belief will magically make things happen. It won't. What belief does is to keep the door of possibility open in your mind long after the practical mind would get frustrated and impatient and give up. Belief is essential for seeing and hearing what the universe has in mind, but it requires trust. Trust that there is a solution that will present itself. But for a truly great solution, there's one more ingredient you need to have to transform lemons into lemonade in the most beautiful of ways, and that is goodwill. Goodwill means that you choose to direct yourself towards delivering goodness to each person, each creature, and each thing involved in the situation, treating everything with reverence. It's easy to come up with anger or hatred or seeking justice that metes out a solution to make things right. Sorry. That cloud of negative energy associated with doing things in that way will only prevent you from seeing through the fog to the greater and more beautiful solution the universe is envisioning for you. You cannot see where you're going if you push a cloud of negative energy out in front of you. What you need is the act of will that insists on creating goodness no matter what bad things have happened to you to get you into the situation you are in. Goodwill is a conscious decision, and it is followed by repeated conscious actions to think in higher ways and to take the higher road in all of your actions and all of your words. The mindless reaction is to simply reflect the negativity you are receiving from the outer world, amplify it, and then send it back out to the world. The act of will is the choice to create the unexpected response so that all the people and all the things around you are transformed by your actions and words. What people may be expecting is for you to simply react. Acts of will are genuine creations that are something new in the space. Remember that great quotation by Albert Einstein? He said, "You cannot solve the problem at the same level that created the problem." What he was speaking about is finding an elevated solution, one that is not visible at the level of the problem. That's never been more true than when you're stuck in a nightmare. If you want to transform what you've got into something greater, it's going to come from a higher place, from higher thinking, from higher words, and from higher actions. So whatever solution is to come, it's going to be higher and greater than the situation you've got now that is obvious and plainly visible to the eyes alone. That means you must elevate your thinking. You have to ask probing questions like, how could I make things better? How could I provide greater service? What could I do that would surprise everyone and make them laugh or feel joyful or more loving about all of this? To intercept the greater mind of the universe, you have to elevate your own mind, your own thinking. What that means is that you cannot involve yourself in what you have. You cannot respond to hatred with hatred. You cannot respond to stress with fear. You cannot live in a dark place and expect magic to happen to suddenly transform yourself to the lighter place. If you take your goodwill, your intention that all who touch this situation be lifted up and elevated to a higher state, only then will you be able to recognize the solution. I said to you that the universe speaks to us through silence. That's something that Father Thomas Keating says. We must become silent and quiet on the inside as if we are Jedi Knights. Do you remember Star Wars? Only by becoming passive and peaceful and non-aggressive will we have the power to see clearly. Truly, the dark side of the Force is all around us in those moments of great challenge. We must hold goodwill in our hearts. We must deeply desire to create goodness for all people involved and to leave a positive footprint where almost everyone else would simply create more negative energy. From this place, we must ask, how can it be done? What is possible? I am small, dear universe. If I am to serve in the great capacity you have envisioned for me, what must I do? In silence, holding the intention of goodwill with patience and trust, a tiny clue will emerge. We don't know when, but something will come our way, often when we least expect it. And here's a great big piece of wisdom for you. The clue you're looking for is so very often in disguise. The clue you're looking for is so very often in disguise. Let me share with you the clue now that didn't seem like much of anything when it came my way. In fact, it was a complaint about something completely unrelated to my problem with the authors. I want you to remember this part of the story because it was so totally unrelated that I couldn't see what might happen next. That very same friend who got us into the author training program had years earlier set us up with gorgeous color posters of peace that we could use to help sponsor our peace-creating efforts in the world. So I get this email from a lady who claims that she never got her peace poster. Wait a second. She should have gotten that poster 7 years ago, and now she's contacting us? The thought crossed my mind that this was a scam to get a free poster, but she seemed sincere. So I asked her which poster did she want, and for some kind of proof that she'd actually paid for the poster. She wrote back, and I could hear the sigh in her email. She said, "It had been too long, and I have no receipt. Oh well." It was then that I noticed the bottom of her email, her signature line. Nancy was apparently the director of a domestic violence and sexual abuse crisis center. Suddenly, I got goosebumps. You see, much more recently, we'd run a peace poster promotion saying that we'd donate a free poster to women's shelters every time someone ordered a 3-poster set, or they could simply buy a poster to be donated. The thing was that delivering to shelters is tougher than it sounds. Their locations are often kept secret for obvious reasons. They want to protect the victims. We still had 30 posters we could not deliver. Out of the blue, here was Nancy. So I quickly packaged up over 200 posters, and I was about to ship them to her when the universe whispered something in my ear. It said only 2 words to me that day, but 2 words from the universe can move mountains. The universe whispered, "Giving Library." And in a flash, there it was. I saw the great vision I'd been slated to deliver. The invisible blind corner that I didn't know was even there was a 7-year-old poster order that failed to reach a good-hearted soul seeking to create greater peace through an inspiring poster in her office that her clients could read at the crisis center. I asked Nancy to call me when she received the package because I included not only those 200 posters, I included a collection of the inspirational books our authors had written, but which were now unsupported by the Lost website. By the time Nancy and I got off the phone, we both had goosebumps. What I'd shared with her was the vision I received when I heard those 2 words, Giving Library. A Giving Library would be a collection of hundreds of free inspirational books that could sit on a coffee table, a bookshelf, or any flat surface. These Giving Libraries were for clients of domestic violence and sexual abuse crisis centers who could pick up and simply take those books. They could return them if they liked, or pass them along to a friend or family member. The point was that while regular libraries want their books back, Giving Libraries simply give their inspirational books away. Here we were with 33,000 inspirational books that were now crippled by the loss of a website. Yet their inspirational content was just as highly pertinent as it was when it was written. My goodwill towards the authors and the ultimate intended readers of those books, combined with my openness to hear what was possible and what the universe wanted me to share through its imagination, in a most unexpected way from around an invisible blind corner, took 7 years to mature. If I didn't have the patience and trust and a sincere desire to convert a disaster into a higher result, I could and probably would have given up. But I chose to seek lemonade no matter what. I refused to let go of the idea that I was responsible for delivering the authors from the darker place to the more beautiful, lighter place imagined only by the universe. On the phone, I painted a grand vision in Nancy's mind of what could be the creation of permanent Giving Libraries in crisis centers around the world. Now, it was a shared vision. But this wasn't a done deal. I had to get the authors to agree to donate their books for which they paid their hard-earned cash to create. Do you remember how Shackleton thought he'd found a solution to save everyone's lives, but he still had to convince everyone that the solution he envisioned would work? This is one of those turning points where you see the solution, but in order for you to get where you want to go, you have to convince other people that it's a good idea too. Now, most of you know all too well that if you're trying to do something in the business world, the what's in it for me runs so rampant that it's exceedingly difficult to get a good idea implemented unless every single person or company gets a financial cut. Here's why seeking a solution that's higher than the problem is so beneficial. If your motives are higher than simply what's in it for me, people will open their hearts. And almost all personal decisions are made by feeling in one way or another, not logic or analysis. Ultimately, feeling is involved. Now, I'm no Ernest Shackleton, but the vision of giving libraries was a higher vision, and it deeply moved everyone I told. How would I get the authors to agree to let go of their hard-earned cash invested into their books in hopes of making even more money? Having a nonprofit to accept the book donations, we could provide them with a tax incentive to donate their books and all the associated production costs that they had incurred. Those who paid us separately for the book catalog listing could write that off as well, since our nonprofit accepted their money and it was used to support our administrative costs. But ultimately, these tax write-offs were not what transformed the authors from places of disappointment and anger. It was the higher vision that backed the whole thing. The conference call I had with all the authors was the most deeply moving and inspiring call I'd ever held. It was a spiritual experience for everyone that was there. Everyone was moved, and I know for a fact that there were tears flowing behind the ears connected to their telephones, because their true purpose in writing their books would finally be fulfilled, to help other people. In the grand scheme of things, I was a pawn, a nothing, and yet I was the face of the universe in that moment that the authors were sending blessings and love to, for helping them share their inspired works with the world. But it wasn't just this. There was another invisible blind corner that I had no idea was going to emerge. I've had passing awareness of domestic violence and sexual abuse. I knew it was out there, but what I didn't know was the scope of these problems. So many people, including authors, shared very private stories of being abused for years. People I'd known for a long time, and I had no clue. As part of our nonprofit work to create peace in the world, I'd innocently bumped into what would turn out to be one of the largest responses we'd ever had to our mailings at 10 million Clicks for Peace. So many people wrote to me with their stories. Donations started pouring in. 5 authors who weren't even part of the author training program donated their books. In fact, I didn't realize it, but Bruce Lipton's wife is on our mailing list. Bruce Lipton, I think you remember from the movie What the Bleep. They wanted to donate 2 boxes of Bruce's books, 2 cases. Volunteers showed up to say they'd help contact crisis centers on our behalf to make those crisis centers aware of this opportunity. Crisis centers responded. They blessed us and thanked us for this great gift in their centers. I'm here to tell you that if you think you have all the information you need to solve the problems you face and you're not getting a solution, it's because you need to hear what the universe has imagined for you. It took 2 of us about a month to package up those 33,000 books, and we had to transform the many boxes that we had into just 100 boxes of what we now call Giving Library Kits, each with about 330 books. So far, we had authors donating books, volunteers finding crisis centers to receive Giving Libraries, good-hearted people donating money to help us with postage and other costs. But you know, whenever something is destined to be, I can assure you the universe's vision is far grander than yours. That whisper, Giving Library, has turned into something more important. The first phase of the Giving Library project is happening right now. I say the first phase because we actually envision 3 phases. Phase 1 is to supply 100 crisis centers with Giving Library kits. that will completely clear out our inventory of books. Phase 2 is the establishment of a new fulfillment center and an outreach to inspirational book publishers to donate their blemished books, their extra books, and even their brand new books to fully cover all crisis centers, homeless shelters, and all other places in need of inspiration with a perpetual supply of inspirational material. And we're going to cover the United States. I say the United States only because it turns out to be incredibly expensive to ship outside the United States. Phase 3 is the establishment of Giving Library fulfillment centers in other countries to support their crisis centers. So there you have it. Lemons into lemonade, delivered through the greater imagination of the universe. What our volunteers have discovered in reaching out to crisis centers is that they absolutely love giving libraries. They love the concept, they want one, and I have many delightful emails expressing their gratefulness for the opportunity to have one. Unfortunately, so many go on to say that they themselves are small nonprofit organizations and they have limited financial resources. We're finding that they're not able to come up with the mailing costs, even though they are getting $1,000 of free inspirational books in each kit. We do have some paid orders for Giving Library kits, but we receive many requests that we simply cannot fill because we can't afford to pay the postage for everyone, and we've overextended ourselves as it is. And of course, there are additional expenses to delivering these kits. It's not just the mailing cost. The library kits the Giving Library kits actually cost us about $50, and that includes postage, boxes, storage fees, packing materials, gasoline, and so on. So if you've been touched by this vision of helping so many people and you want to join our authors in providing light, hope, healing, and love to fellow victims of violence, your financial contribution would be most gratefully received and put to very good use. Your gift of $50 is all it takes to get a Giving Library kit into a crisis center, and that has the capacity to give hope and healing to up to about 330 people.